Hi everybody, welcome to this live stream where I chat with Aidan Leslie, a former dancer who has lived with EDS and is going to talk about the process that she has been through and living with it and what it's like. We'll give a few minutes for people to join in and come on in. Aidan join. Hi Aidan, and perfect, you requested. And you should be getting a join in just a second here. So I'm excited because I think, hey!
Hi!
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Excellent. I love that. We're going to give a few minutes to let people have time to join in.
Okay.
So we'll just give a few seconds here while people come in and see what's going on. We are talking today with, I am talking today with Aidan Leslie, former dancer who is living with EDS, and she's going to talk about kind of her journey and what all she has been through and how it's affected her life, and maybe some tips or suggestions she would have for other people, and just kind of see what she has done with it. EDS is often something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Hey Linda, fabulous to see you as well. I know she's happy to see Aidan. EDS is not something that gets talked about a lot. And living with EDS, hey Jordan, I was hoping you'd be able to tune in here. Good to see you, and of course you get to see Aidan as well. Because EDS is something that a lot of people just live with. There's no cure, so it's not like, hey, let's rush out and do this, this, and this, and then we're cured. And those kind of long-term issues are kind of boring to talk about sometimes because people check back in and they're like, any better? And you're like, still the same. I don't know what you thought would happen, but it's still the same. I still have it. So, yay, good to see you too, Jordan. So I thought we would spend some time today talking to you about sort of your past and what got you here, and what worked, what didn't work, what surprised you, and how you sort of keep going, putting one foot in front of each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay. So first of all, why don't you tell everyone about your dance background? Just kind of fill them in on where you came from.
All right. Well, I'm Aidan, and I started dancing when I was 3. I lived in Pittsburgh, and I saw the Pittsburgh Ballet Theater Nutcracker, and I was hooked immediately. So I started in like a little tiny mom and pop competition studio. And I danced there for years and years, and then I moved to Dallas, Texas area, and did competition for another couple of years, and then eventually decided to go full-time into ballet, and did that for another several years. I did ballet mostly, and then a little bit of modern, a little bit of jazz, very sporadically, but a little bit, and I started doing summer programs. So I went to American Ballet Theater, their Young Dancer Workshop in New York City. I went to Canada's National Ballet School in Toronto, and I went to PNB for 4 years in a row. So lots of PNB. And
Yes.
I was planning on going and dancing professionally, and was making steps to go in that area, and got very close, and then had some EDS complications pop up, so didn't end up following through with that, but yeah, I have a lot of ballet background.
So your ballet background leans mostly towards Balanchine style.
Yes.
Right? Okay, but you have been predominantly a ballet dancer.
Yes.
Even though you started out in the competition scene.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have that contrast between the two different scenes and the two different ways that they approach the body and how they use the body. So that's useful for you as well. So when were you first diagnosed with EDS?
I was first diagnosed by you in a roundabout.
No, because I cannot diagnose.
Yes, but you were the first one that sort of gave me an idea that I should look into it.
Fair enough.
I was having a lot of problems with injuries, just constant injuries, and so I started trying to find sort of cross-training methods to try and help with that, and feel a little bit better while I was dancing. And so I talked to my regular doctor and my PCP, and he said, he didn't know a lot about EDS, but when I brought it up, and then he said, that sounds pretty good. I mean, sure, let's go with it. I think is the general sort of consensus by a lot of doctors, that because it's just not really taught in medical school very much. And then when I started having more and more complications from EDS. I think with a lot of people, that happened with me definitely, it starts to snowball. And I just started getting more and more and more. And that's when we started to see some more specialized people. I saw Dr. Bluestein, which I saw in chat earlier, and
Yes, hey, Linda.
I saw some. I saw Dr. Newman at UT Southwestern, which is in the Dallas area, and I saw a bunch of those people, and they sort of really were the first ones to say, "Yeah, you've got EDS." So it took to get the full general diagnosis took a good several years, but it took a lot of development of symptoms before I got a real diagnosis. But it was mainly Dr. Bluestein in herbology practice and Dr. Newman in UT Southwestern.
Gotcha. So you said that you, and also everybody, if you have questions as this goes on, throw them up there, and if she's talking, I'll write them down and I'll bring them back to her. Okay? So if you have questions about this, this is a complicated subject. It doesn't get talked about a lot, so feel free to ask questions. What kind of injuries were you having that had you going and starting to ask questions about it?
I had a lot of injuries, sort of one after the other. I remember I had a 6-month period where I had an ankle sprain, 2 separate types of tendonitis, and ended up needing a surgery due to an extra bone in 6 months. So I was having a lot of problems with tendonitis everywhere. I mean, hips, knees, and feet constantly. I was having problems with cartilage in my knees. They weren't extraordinarily stable due to the EDS, so if I was doing a lot of grand pliés, or just in general, specifically modern. I know there's a lot of modern and jazz tend to have a little bit more groundwork, and a lot of times that would sort of beat up my knees, and I was having cartilage problems with my knees. And then some of the real red flags were I was learning serenade, George Balanchine serenade, and we were doing, there's a big back bend, and I felt something wrong with my back afterwards, and it got really, really painful. And we eventually found out that I had subluxed my SI joint pretty badly, and I had to have it pop back in. And then it got better. But that was sort of, then we started seeing, my family and I started seeing a lot more subluxations coming from there, and especially as I started doing more partnering. There was anything, finger turns were the death of me. My shoulders just did not stay in the socket. And just a lot of kind of things like that. I had a lot of problems with my feet because I have really, the collagen that comes from EDS means that my feet are very loosey-goosey. So I'm...
Sorry, your feet are very what?
Oh, we good?
It just glitched for a second.
Okay. I have very loose feet, loose joints.
Come back. Hopefully that's... Okay? Hold on a second. Okay, are you still there? What's happening?
I'm here.
You come in and out. Okay. Yes, I'm gonna say you're back. Maybe you're not. Now I'm all nervous. I'm like, your feet are very what?
They're very loose. I had a lot of problems with point shoes because I slipped light in them, and get size. It was just a nightmare. So I ended up having problems with toes and tendonitis injuries from the point shoes being a bit of just a lot of sort of ended up creating a lot of long-term problems.
So you were having looseness, right? You were having, just because the connective tissue is so much looser, sliding down in the box, not able to use, you felt like you couldn't use your feet.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't. You're cutting in and out, and I can't tell if it's my internet connection or yours. Hang in there, okay?
Okay.
Do you see me freezing, or is it just you freezing up for me?
You're freezing a little. You're freezing pretty.
I'm freezing off and on too? Let me...
Yes.
I may have to check my internet connection, and if my internet connection has to be fixed, I may lose everybody, and we may have to come right back, okay? Aidan is clear, says Jordan. It's just... saying it's just me. Whew. Hi, I'm neat. Whew. Aidan's clear. It's my problem. It's my connection. Okay. Okay, I'm going to try to fix this, so I'm going to end this, and we're going to come right back within 60 seconds, okay? So wait right there. Okay, let's try this again. we'll see if it works. We have a lot of people streaming in my house right now. Hopefully it will start. So I will wait for everybody to come back in. Fingers crossed that people will be able to come back in. Let's see. Hey, Andrea. There she is. Okay, Aidan, request to join again. Hey, Holly. Okay. Yes, you're there.
Again.
Yes, let's try it again. I have 5 people streaming in my house at once right now, so.
Oh, yeah.
If it happens again, kiddo, you have to get off.
Okay.
Not you, my
Oh.
children. Just my kids. All right, we are back. Okay, so we were talking with Aidan Leslie for the people who picked this up as their first video of the day. We were talking with Aidan Leslie about EDS and sort of living with it and what it's like. She talked about how she is a ballet dancer and was talking about injuries that kind of come concurrently, started slowly, and then start to kind of cascade in a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So your SI joint that popped out during Serenade, yes, was it fine after that? Or
No. I think a lot of people with EDS find that once you have a sort of pretty major episode like that where you have a pretty big subluxation, it does not want to go back into its happy little safe place. So it's something that I still deal with most days, and I definitely learned how to pop it back in myself and how to take care of it. And
don't try that at home.
Don't try that at home. That took many safe supervisions with PTs.
Yes, that was physical therapists helping her and working her through that as well, Kate. So yes, don't try that at home. But once you felt that go out for the first time, put it back in, and then it seems to kind of subluxate more and more frequently, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the same with your shoulder, is your shoulder would subluxate during, like you said, finger turns, but then also would start to come out during other things as well, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then some of the things I remember, so I've trained Aidan for several years, which is why she agreed to come on here for me, but I remember you subluxated your back with a very violent assisted arabesque one time.
Yes.
Right, so it gets to be little things
Yeah.
that you don't even think, that your body just can't guard against as well, and that's the kind of thing that happens. Yeah. And then the other thing you mentioned were a lot of tendinopathies.
Yes.
Foot tendinopathies, ankle tendinopathies, which is also very common for people with EDS to have connective tissue issues like tendons or ligaments that get inflamed, and once they do, they have a really hard time calming down. Yes.
Found that one to be true.
Yes. So if you see a doctor who's not used to working with people with EDS or anywhere on the hypermobility spectrum, they'll say, 6 to 8 weeks and you'll be fine. And you're like, weeks? Because that is not true. It just takes longer, and I think that's one of the things that you learned the hard way, is that you have to double or triple what a doctor will say sometimes, and know that it's going to take a while for that recovery to happen. And in general, it's kind of slow and low, right?
Yes.
Low levels of exercise and maintenance, and really slowly trying to work and come back in from where you were. But you can't get frustrated and throw yourself at it and say, I'm just going to work really hard and I'm going to get all better. And
it does not work to be that way at all.
Yes. Excellent. Yes. So what sort of issues did you have as a dancer that once you had the EDS diagnosis, you were like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Other than the sprains and the subluxations, was there anything else?
There was quite a few things. I dehydrate very, very quickly. I have problems with orthostatic hypotension, or POTS, and so snow and waltz and nutcrackers, waltz of the flowers, waltz of the snowflakes. It was brutal every single year, and I remember there was always one specific part where we had a lot of cardio kick in and a lot of hard work, and I would go off stage for my exit, and I would lose my vision, and then I'd sort of black out and almost pass out pretty much every single time we ran it. And I thought that was pretty much normal. I thought that was just, a lot of cardio.
Right. You just hadn't done enough cardio leading up to it, right?
Yeah, no. So that was a big one. There were a couple of things with partnering that I had probably, partners would lift me up, and you could feel my ribs kind of pop in and out and sort of squish, and they were like, "What was that?" And I'm like, "It's fine."
Everybody's ribs squish.
Yeah. So I had problems with that. I had sort of a lot of little things that I just thought were normal. And then found out they weren't once I had EDS and got the diagnosis and started realizing that I needed to keep an eye out on those things because that was not normal.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up the POTS thing, because POTS, positional orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, I think is what it's called.
A lot of big words.
A lot of big words. POTS is a common comorbidity for EDS. So the dancers that I've seen with EDS have that sense of, I'm just not in shape enough, I'm just not working hard enough. Postural, thank you, not positional. Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Thank you, Jordan. Have that sense of, I'm not in shape enough, I haven't done enough cardio. If I did, I would be better. And the more cardio you try to do, actually, the worse you start to feel. Yeah, exactly. Because again, it's slow and low, and you just can't push yourself to those heights. So you, again, have that sense in rehearsal of, I'm not doing enough, I'm not pushing myself hard enough. And it can be easy for, I would think, directors to get frustrated with that. And to want to say, oh, well, just don't be in this part, or you need to work harder, or go do more at home, or something.
It was always just, let's run it again. Let's just do it more and more and more. And you're like, okay, but I won't be able to see you in the next minute. Yes. So, yeah, that was definitely something I had to figure out as I was doing it.
Yes, and not being able to see. I've had so many of my dancers say, well, my vision blacks out, but I don't really pass out. And I'm like, well,
it's just a little pass out.
It's just a little POTS. Yeah, exactly. That still counts. Yeah, that still is a warning sign that says, hey, let's check on this and see what's going on. I mean, there are times if you're going to run snow and it's the first time and you haven't exercised enough and gotten yourself ready, you might start to see your vision black. Like, everybody will go through that. And in exercise at some point, but it's not something that should be regular, and not if you're at the peak of your game, and not if you are really trying to be healthy and do all the things that you should and move yourself forward. So we talked a little bit about injuries, but what was that injury recovery like? I kind of mentioned the slow and low, but for you, what did it feel like? What sort of things did you do that helped the most?
For me, the main thing every single day was sort of preventative work, even if I was injured. So like heating pad was my best friend for my back subluxations. I remember when I was at P&B, I would park myself to do my hair every morning and load up with the heating pad, and that would be my little morning routine. And I would have at night I would roll out my calves and everything, and it was a lot of everyday sort of ritualistic preventative treatments, because I found that was the best way, was to even if I was injured, was to kind of get that low and slow sort of steady heartbeat of things to just make myself feel better. So making sure I had a really good warm-up before every class and rehearsal, and if I had a pretty long break, making sure I warm myself back up, because it would be brutal if I didn't. And just a lot of kind of little things. I know for me, staying hydrated was so important, and that was another thing that sort of studio directors and teachers sometimes didn't always click into. There was always a little bit of a stigma that was like, oh, why are you drinking water? That's reserved for like special times when you can have water. And
right.
Just that was not the
once every 3 hours, whether you need it or not. Hey, Bethany.
Hi, Beth. So, yeah, I realized very, very quickly that the best way for me to do it was to just stay on top of all that. I remember bringing in 2 water bottles into every rehearsal. I would have one with water and one with water with electrolytes, just to kind of make sure I was having both, and learned to quickly get over that and just sort of push back past through that stigma and everything, because in the end, I would feel so much better if I just did it anyways. So learning to find all those little things, and I think it's there are some things that you just kind of have to figure out what work for you, and through a little bit of trial and error, because I mean everybody with EDS has different things that pop up with them and different flares, especially when you're dancing. So finding those little things that you can do every day to just feel better was really important for me.
And when you found something or felt something that was starting to happen, what worked best for you? Like just kind of living with it and trying to keep pushing through it, or what was your approach when you felt something start to creep in?
For me, if I felt something start to creep in, I knew that if I didn't address it pretty much immediately, it would get blown so out of control, and then I would have to take a lot more time off or scale back a lot of things that sometimes wasn't. I learned that the best thing for me to do was to address it immediately. And for me, making sure that I was staying warm, a lot of the times that would be a problem. So I got permission from my teachers and my directors and everything to wear leg warmers if I had something wrong with my knee, or a lot of time it was my knee or my ankle or something, or with my back. I had a special, like a little back sleeve that was fleece that would keep my back warm. Because rehearsals a lot of the time is if you're not running something, you're just standing on the side. So it was very important for me to find things like staying warm constantly, or asking PTs. I had pretty much a standing PT appointment for every year that I was dancing, and then a while afterwards. So asking for help when something started coming up was really, really important, especially if it was something I had never had problems with before. Like when my knee injury started, I was like, wait, what? So asking for help and learning those exercises from PTs and from people like you to help sort of nip it in the bud before it got blown out of control was very, very important.
And that's so critical too, that sometimes taking 3 days off when you start to feel something happening is going to prevent you taking 3 weeks off further down the road. And it's something that we always try to push through, and so it can be hard, especially as a pre-professional dancer, to say, my ankle's bothering me a little bit, so I'm going to sit out tonight. And the directors are like, push through it, you can do it, come on. But I know that the school that you danced at was very accommodating and very kind about that, because you kind of helped educate them and brought them alongside. So speaking of that, it can be really hard. Yes, I know you hear me, Caroline Johnson. Speaking of that, how, as a pre-professional dancer, were you able to figure out how to advocate for yourself? Because it's really hard to stand up to a director and say, I respectfully hear your wish for us to only hydrate once every 8 hours. Yes. However, I must have more. Like, how did you do that?
It was hard, especially when I was sort of a baby in the company. It was very hard to ask for things like that. But I did learn that if I didn't ask, that nothing would change. So to be respectful, be very respectful was what I learned, was to say, I'm having this problem, and to explain where you're coming from. If you don't just sort of come and say, hey, I need 3 days off. But if you come in and sort of explain, you say, I've had problems similar to this before, and I know that if I take tonight off, I'll feel much better and be able to better prepare for rehearsals and performances later on. Everyone was much more accommodating to that. So I think being respectful and explaining is always a good way to start off with, and to just ask. I mean, the worst thing they can do is say no, which is what I had to learn. And then, so yeah, you got to sort of be very respectful, but definitely ask.
And I think one of the things that you said there that is really helpful is that you don't just ask, but you offer a solution with it as well. It hurts right now, and rather than just saying, I'm not coming tonight, you say, if I can take tonight off, I will be able to do it tomorrow or the next day. So showing them the big picture and not just, I'm out of here. Right?
That was
You can guess when I'm going to come back. Yes. And that's hard as dancers to step back and to say, I need to step back and not do this, because that's what we want to do. We want to push through. We want to see if we can just do this little more, do this little extra. And it's so important to learn, whether you have EDS or not, to have that self-care aspect of, it's time for me to pull back, and it will be so much better in the long run if I do. And I think that I have other dancers with hypermobility issues that are the exact same way, and they have learned to, I'm feeling a little funky, so I'm going to not take class today, or I'm going to just say, hey, can I not do it on point? Or, right, and just seeing the big picture, which is so hard for dancers, but is one of the things I talk about all the time. So when you were dancing, And you have your issues. You have your funky back.
Yes.
Present tense yoga. I'm just going to read this out loud real quick in case it disappears. But then we're going to come back to this, okay? From what I've come across with hypermobility and EDS, I understand there are mental, emotional aspects of it beyond the considerations of responding to the physical side of it. Present tense yoga, girl, we could talk about that for 6 hours.
Oh, yeah.
And
on that one.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that it is both EDS Awareness Month and National Health Awareness Month.
Yes.
Because they go together.
Yes.
We will come back to that. So you be thinking about how you want to address that. But let me write down that because, yes, there is a huge component of that. And I can address some of it in broad terms, and Aidan can address what she wants in a more personal scope. But yes, that's an incredibly important question to have. So when you have these issues, how did you accommodate your body within the class and choreography? Like if you're at PNB and you can't be like, I'm just gonna rest, you know,
No,
or
yeah.
Listen, Peter, I'm just gonna sit down, you know.
I'm just gonna not do this one.
I'm just gonna not do that one. It's better for my back. So how would you try to make those accommodations if you were in a partnering class?
Yeah.
Would you say to your partner, listen, when you do this thing, if you don't watch my arm, it's going to come out of the socket?
Yeah.
Like, would you have those conversations?
Yes, with partnering especially, communication was so important. And I didn't know that until much later after I had my EDS diagnosis. I did not know that everyone's hands didn't just squish around.
Don't just squish. Yeah.
No idea. So that it was very important for me later on because it seems like it's little things, but then when you start trying to partner and it's very, very important, all those little things, you start realizing that communication is really, really helpful and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for partnering for me, it was always so important to say, like, thank you so much for your help. If you put my arm too far behind my head, it will pop out of the socket. So communication was so, so important. And it was a little embarrassing at first because no one knows what you're talking about. No one knows, like, what? It's going to just fly out of the socket? What are you talking about? So being very open and willing to say, hey, can we move this forward a little bit? And can you not do this? And if you lift me up, just know my ribs probably going to squish a little bit, and that's okay.
Don't freak out and drop me.
Exactly. So, being with partnering, it was very, very important for me. With communication was like number one.
Mm-hmm.
And then especially when I had summer programs like PNB, I tried to do my best with the preventative care. Was my sort of go-to. Was making sure I was doing everything I could outside of class to be my best in class. But there are always going to be times, especially with EDS, where like no matter how hard you put in the time and the effort and everything, some things are going to just flare up a little bit. And so being willing to sort of go up to teachers and say, I have this problem, I have this injury, my back is really bad, is it okay if I don't, do 32 fouettes on my knee that just sublexed yesterday? So definitely, there are times where you don't always have the option to opt out, but finding every time that you can to do the preventative work so you feel better, and then of course when there are times where you absolutely have to, and then sort of the same thing before with asking and providing an explanation and being very respectful. It was always the best way for me to do things like that.
And so what about working with choreographers? Did you feel like you had the freedom to say, I'm not going to do that, and here's why? Or could we rework it otherwise? Because I know your Birds of Paradise look great.
Yes.
And I know your Scorpion looks great. However,
yeah.
Did you feel like that you could?
Yeah, it kind of depended on my relationship with the choreographer. I know when it was sort of very fleeting things where we had people coming in and doing very, very brief things, it was definitely more difficult. Especially when I was younger in the company, if I was just in the court ballet, I didn't have very much advocacy to sort of step up and say, hey, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
So for that sort of point, since that point, I didn't always have the ability to sort of opt out of everything. So finding ways to work with it, I know, again, asking PT, asking for help with, if I had other teachers who I knew choreography and were also very comfortable with me asking for help, if something feels off, asking for people who understand what's going on to maybe take a look at it and see if there's something, a muscle I'm not engaging, or something I'm a little bit doing slightly awkwardly, to find ways like that. That was sort of my workaround. But especially as I got more comfortable with a choreographer, and started working with them more and more, especially if they were sort of our in-house choreographers, there was definitely a point where I could say, is it okay if I, drop this arabesque into a lower one, or something like that, to find ways. So not every time I was working with someone did I have the chance to do that, but there are definitely ways to work with it, and work around it.
Well, and speaking of working around it, people with EDS are really good at cheating.
Yes, we are.
It's amazing to me because you're really good cheaters, because it's really hard for your body to learn new things. I always say working with someone with EDS is like working with people who have ADD in their muscles. Like their muscles have ADD. And one of my dancers, you know who you are, every time she would show up to work with me, I have people do a standing leg balance work, right? And so I do have them stand on one leg and just practice and see what they can do. And every single time that dancer would do that, her body would be like, you want me to do what? You have never asked us to do this before. This is crazy. I don't understand. And it would be like so dramatic.
Yes.
And she'd be flailing everywhere. And I'm like, how do you do 32 fortes? And you can't, but every single time the body would say, wait, you want me to do what? And I'm like, we talked about this last week. Yeah. Okay, body? We talked about this last week. We spent 20 minutes talking about it. You finally figured it out. And yet here we are again. So there's that sense of low and slow with your recovering from an injury, but there's also that sense of low and slow with trying to progress your body correctly, trying to learn new things, trying to do it right. Like you said, you would go to a PT or someone like me and say, what am I doing wrong here? How can I make this right in the choreography? And that takes so much time because it feels like you're doing nothing. And yet you're shaking and falling over. So it takes a long time to be able to get there, right?
It really does.
And that takes a lot of determination. So all of this, the accommodations that you have to make, the changing your diet to make sure you have plenty of water, that you hydrate well, checking your nutritional balance, making sure you're getting the vitamins and minerals that people with EDS absorb differently than people without EDS. That, and then dealing with adjusting the choreography and the pots and all of that, that has to take an emotional toll on you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. So did you just hit that point where it felt like, I don't know if it's worth it to keep trying to plow through this? Or do you just think I'm going to keep going until my body says no? Or how did that happen for you?
It was sort of both of them together in a very intricately woven pattern. What I really...
In other words, it was complicated?
It was very weird. It was dramatic and complicated.
So odd.
Like the EDS tagline. So when I was 18, I got hit with a very bad headache that in 2 years still has not gone away. And it's essentially a migraine that I have every second of every day, which, as you can imagine, with ballet is really, really hard. Because suddenly, port de bras forward, no go. Port de bras back, no go. Turns, no. Jumps, don't know them. So it was I had to learn very quickly how to work with it, and I struggled for, I think it was 6 or 7 months of trying to find a balance between taking time off to rest while still trying to stay in shape, while cross-training, while trying to make these accommodations, and
while trying to figure out what's
what's going on with the EDS.
Right.
So it was really, really hard, and I finally got to the point after months and months of trying, and I had several sort of backup plans because all of my summer program got pushed back, and everything I had sort of lined up immediately was gone. Like a candle blown out. So I had to start learning how to manage that, and after several months of trying, I remember standing at the bar, not being able to do a port de bras forward, and going, I'm done. It was just sort of, I reached the point where it was, I was so limited to what I could do that it was more frustrating and more sort of painful to keep trying and keep pushing and to keep trying to find all those accommodations, that it stopped being feasible for me. And that was very hard. It was, I had to sort of let that go and everything that went with it. But it was definitely sort of a lot of mix of a lot of different things going on with my body, and with trying to figure out how I'm supposed to do anything with this headache. And it's sort of all kind of mixed and brewed for 7 months before I sort of realized this is not my path anymore, and it's time to find a different one.
And I know that had to be a really difficult decision that you made. Even before that, though, even before you got your headache, dealing constantly with the maintenance and having a full pit crew just to keep you in the classroom, right? Even before the headache, we're talking about small injuries, small aches and pains, all that constant accommodation. That has to be emotionally draining.
It really was. And the dancers are we constantly have everybody watching us, whether it's the audience or the teachers or your peers and everything like that. And at times I would get very, very self-conscious, because here I am trying to do whatever role I was doing, and I had like a leg warmer, shorts, and a back warmer on, and I was still opting out of the Italian fouettes, and I had, conversations with teachers after every class or before every class saying, can I please not do this so that I can do the show tomorrow?
Right.
And, you definitely get, I found people with EDS get very, very self-conscious about things like that, because, it's sort of drilled into us to just go and push and keep going, and, you can relax when the curtain comes down and everything. So it was very emotionally draining, and sort of, I felt very self-conscious and sort of ashamed about it, because, I'm constantly having to work. I was constantly having to work 3 times as hard just to stay in the game. And I remember at P&B having my roommates go out and like hang out and go out to dinner every night. And you're like, I'm going to be in my dorm room doing my Pilates exercises with my parasetter and my calf roller. And,
right.
and my like chugging water kind of thing. So
just to be able to go to class the next day.
Just to be able to go to class the next day.
Right.
And that was definitely very draining, and there was a definite element of anxiety in there. That's, what if I get into class and something subluxes, or, I can't do this, or I can't do that, and constantly feeling that sort of social anxiety that, like, oh, I'm the only one not on point today, and everything like that. There was definitely that emotional component and all of that in it.
Yeah. And the sense of that low-level pain that is just emotionally draining, when your joints ache all the time, when you've got a low-level headache, when you feel your shoulders about to sublux all the time. That just is super draining. And I'm speaking from experience too, as you guys know. That's super stressful. And you go through that, or I go through those cycles, or did as a dancer, of it's not fair. Like, why am I living with this low-level pain, and when is it going to be not so hard? Right? When is it going to be, when is all of this hard work going to pay off? And I'm going to hit that plateau of everything is great. And hitting that realization of the answer is probably never. You are going to be constantly doing this, and you are going to constantly have a longer recovery time than everybody else. And there comes a point, and I tell all my dancers this, there comes a point where it's not worth it anymore, and that scale tips. And when that scale tips, it is 100% okay. And I say this all the time. It is okay to stop dancing. You do not, when you feel that scale tip and you don't love it so much that you are pushing super hard just to stay in the game, it is okay to let go of that, right?
Yeah, I had to learn that, because there was, I was the ballerina. I was was doing the rolls, and I was wearing the tutus and the point shoes and the tiaras, and I had all these great dreams lined up that I was going to do, and it got to the point where I'm like, no. It got to the point where it just, the scale, like you said, the scale tipped, and I was like, I need to take care of myself first and foremost, and staying in ballet and all of that wasn't the way to take care of myself in that moment. So and I had to sort of realize that and come to terms with it, and because it's so okay to just take a step back and be like, I need a break. I need some time to just step away and not be the ballerina for a little bit, and just focus on healing and staying healthy as you can be. So yeah, it's a big thing. It's just knowing that it's okay to take a breather.
Oh,
Oh,
Dr.
Dr.
Bluestein.
Bluestein.
That's so sweet. Well, present tense yoga brought up the whole mental health and anxiety issue of it. And so before you share what you want to share, I will say there are so many studies out that Dr. Bluestein can point you towards if you want to see that show statistically a higher rate than the general population of people with EDS having mental health issues, having OCD, and having perfectionist issues. High anxiety is incredibly common. Having issues of mental health, depression is incredibly common. I see a high, just casually without any sort of studies done, a higher incidence of mental giftedness, which I think tips the scales towards emotional stress anyway, and having that high performance, high anxiety, perfectionist sort of stuff. So it is absolutely true that there is a higher percentage, and Linda said, yep, that's the short answer. There is a higher percentage of people with EDS who have, or hypermobility issues, who have emotional and mental health issues. It's a huge component of it, partly, as you said, because it's a lot to live through, and partly because for whatever reason, that's the way the brain is wired. We're hoping there's going to be more research on that and what the connection might be between collagen and the way that the brain functions. Linda's just increasing her exclamation points. They're just getting bigger and bigger. So, but I can say just from what I've seen interacting with others and myself who have EDS, that's very, very much there. Do you want to talk at all about that?
Yeah, I will, because I think it's so important, because I think it's especially, I know everyone that I've worked with EDS is sort of in similar boats. And it's definitely something that I struggle with every day. I know I had really bad anxiety about performances. If you put me in the studio with my teacher or just by myself, I was usually pretty good. And I loved performing. Is when I was on the stage and I was having, like, out there in front of everything, I was having a great time. But the second I got into the wings, or I was waiting to go on stage, it was a nightmare. I used to have panic attacks consistently. I would go on stage, I would dance, I'd come off into the wing, have a panic attack, pull myself back together, go back on for the next entrance. And it was something that I dealt with. It was a battle every single performance. And it was trying to find, and I see Jordan knows that.
Jordan's like, preach it!
It was something that was definitely part of every single performance, every single day. And it's something that, I had to work with, and I think going to speaking with a counselor, going to therapy, and talking about it was very, very important. Which is why I think it's so important what you and Dr. Bluestein and everybody's doing to talk about it and to bring awareness to it, especially during EDS Awareness Month, because it is such a big part of it. Is not just the physical pain, but everything that sort of comes with it, or just from brain chemistry due to the comorbid problems.
Yep. I will say every pre-professional dancer that I have had has had to deal with mental health issues, has had to deal with high anxiety, has had to deal with that sense of perfectionism. And many of them have had to deal with eating disorders as well, because they connect so much. So I would encourage, if you are a practitioner, like a yoga practitioner or a Pilates trainer or any other kind of a trainer, and you are working with someone with EDS, if you see them struggling with this, encourage them to find someone to talk to. It's something I talk about very casually, not like, oh yeah, whatever, but just very matter-of-factly. Just say, well, you can do this, you can go see a counselor, we can, help them find that people to talk to, because it definitely is something that needs to be addressed, because just living with that low-level pain, earlier recognition improves outcomes. Yes, see? Yeah. Living with low-level pain is enough, honestly, for some people to have that stress in their life that puts them where they need to go talk to someone. So that is what I will say to that.
Yes.
Now, for people who are living with EDS, who maybe are not dancing anymore, or who never did dance, what would you say about physicality and what you try to do now physically to maintain yourself? Do you feel like cutting back on everything helps the most, like doing as little as possible physically? Where do you find that to try to stay healthy?
It's definitely a process. Every single day is a process. I know part of what comes with EDS, I have a lot of problems with chronic fatigue syndrome and just the general pain. There are a lot of days when it feels physically impossible to try and do any sort of exercise. And so I've tried to find I call it my baseline, which is just some like gentle Pilates, tiny bits of like yoga stretching. Because while a lot of EDS, joints are very flexible, a lot of the times the sort of muscle problems are very, very tight. So trying to find that balance of stretching the things that need to be stretched without stretching the things that do not need to be stretched.
Right.
So for me, that was really important, was trying to find a baseline to do like every day, every other day, because I know I feel so much better. Especially with, chronic fatigue syndrome, you spend a lot of time resting, and you can get, I know I have a lot of problems with my back and with my neck from my headache it sort of tightens and gets worse.
Right.
But as long as I try to stick to, as much as I can, my baseline of doing very gentle things, going for a walk around the block, especially in quarantine right now. Strap on that mask and go for a walk.
Which improves your breath control.
Yeah. So trying to find, for me, just having that baseline and then getting to build from there on the days when I do feel up to it, doing a little bit more. I know I try to do Pilates as often as I can to try, because I know it feels better and doing it. And I've tried to find, I've worked with you a lot on that balance between sort of recovery workouts and exercises and stability and progression exercises and recovery, trying to find a balance between the two, because it's so important for people with hypermobility issues. But yeah, for me, it was definitely trying to find a baseline and then building from there when I feel able. But also recognizing that because of EDS, there are going to be days when I can't even do the baseline. And learning to forgive myself for that and learn that that's okay, but to keep coming back to it. Taking, if I need that day off, but then coming back the next day, and even if it's just doing half of it, doing the very, very, very minimum. But trying to find that balance. For me, EDS is all about balance and moderation and trying to pick out of each thing and make a nice little combination of all of them.
Well, and one of the things you said there, trying to maybe take the day off when you need to and then come back and even just do half of it. Studies do show that people with EDS decondition faster than people without EDS. So if you are tired and you need to rest, then you should rest. And then if you feel like, oh, I'm so weak, I just can't do anything, that's different. And that's when you need to push yourself a little bit, or you will decondition quickly and end up, flat on your back 24/7 and wonder what happened here. How did I get from there to here? So pushing yourself in a healthy way and learning what that feels like. What am I pushing my joints too much? Am I pushing my headache too much? Is different than I'm tired and I don't think I can do another one.
Yes.
That's when you do one more.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And as a movement practitioner, I would say learning how in touch your client is with her body, if she knows and can say, oh, I shouldn't do one more, or if she needs to be pushed to do one more. With Aidan, I let her tell me what to do. And she'll say, if we could just not do forward bending today, or if we can do this. But if there's no restrictions, then I can watch her physically and see how far I can push her. So having a good communication with your client and realizing sort of their boundaries in their space, then you can know how far to push them. But absolutely, in the big scope of things, keep moving, because that helps with mental health as well.
Yeah, you just feel better.
Yeah, you just feel better all over.
Feel so much better.
Yes. Something you said earlier that I wanted to circle back to really quickly. You were talking about surgery. You had surgery for your ankle, I think.
Yes.
And I wanted to talk to you really briefly about this. What was the recovery like for you? Because EDS sometimes has complications for recovery as well.
Sort of the first few weeks after recovery were actually pretty good.
Okay.
I had an extra bone in the back of my ankle that was getting impinged when I was doing point work. So I had it removed, which pulled me out of the spring show. It was like the week before the spring show, which for me was sort of, it sounds bad, but like the best time for it to happen, because while I wasn't in the show, everyone else was working on the show. So it gave me, if I wasn't in those rehearsals, it gave me sort of a time and a rest time to recuperate and to take all that time off. Because it was, I think, it was several years ago, but I think it was about 6 weeks, I think, of minimal to a little bit of like no to minimal activity of time off. And I did everything by the book. I worked with my doctor, I worked with my PT, I worked with my teachers, I worked with everybody to make sure I was coming back, like you said, low and slow. I did not have my EDS diagnosis at that point, but it was, we all knew that I was very injury prone. This was at the end of the 6 months of being sort of consistently injured. So we all had very open communication and coming back low and slow with that. And then the real problems hit, I think, about 3 months after that. I had very, very bad scar tissue from the surgery, and I will not go into detail because it was really gross, but I had some complications with the scar tissue that ended up it hit me while I was at my first year at PNB. It was in the middle of summer program, and I had really, really bad problems with it, and it made me come home before the end of the program. I had the doctor out there fly me home. So I, it was rough because I was like, it's been months since the surgery, and now this is hitting. So that was sort of a bit of an EDS red flag, but that was definitely the main complication I had. And afterwards, I think we worked really hard with my PT and everybody to make sure I was doing everything by the book. But with EDS, these complications come out of absolutely nowhere, especially if you don't know to keep an eye out for them before you have your diagnosis.
Right. And scar tissue is very common, having a lot of scar tissue because the body heals differently because the body makes collagen differently. So that's a very common one. Another common area, just out of curiosity, how did your body react to anesthesia and things like that?
Oddly, that one was okay. But I have had several sort of procedures done with my headache and have found that general anesthesia is fine, but local anesthesia usually doesn't work on me. So I know I had a lot of local anesthetics done on my back to try and help with my neck, and none of them have worked. So that was an interesting one because the sort of general worked, but the local doesn't. And that was something I had to learn to be very open and communicative with the doctors that were doing that. And, say like, hey, I'm still feeling it, and also my shoulder's slipping out. Can you stick a towel under there? So, sort of communication was very big and all of that. But yeah, I had more problems with the local anesthetics than the general, which I understand is a big EDS component. Is local anesthetic is just doesn't vibe with us.
It doesn't work, right? It's like our superpower that we can process it super fast. We just take it in and we're like, dun da da, all gone. And then the doctors are like, she's a junkie. She's asking for more. And you're like, I'm not a junkie. Do you have issues with other medications? Like in general, does your body process them differently, or is it just anesthesia? Or?
I haven't noticed too many reactions.
Okay.
I know I get I think that we talked about this doctor when I saw Dr. Bluestein. I have a little bit of mast cell activation, which is another comorbid EDS problem, and so I tend to get hives, especially from stress, but also if I have bad reactions to not as much drugs or prescriptions or anything like that, but more from laundry detergent happens a lot of the time, or stress or anything like that. So I tend to have more very strange reactions to little things than the big ones, which gotta love EDS. Just likes to just peek its little head out and say,
right,
you weren't expecting me.
Yeah, and pretty much anything that comes up in your life, you're like, probably the EDS.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it can cover a whole host of things. It's all throughout the body. Anything weird going on, it's probably the EDS.
Yes.
Yeah. Thyroid? Sure. Digestion issues? Yeah, sure. Yeah, like all of it. Yes. It's all. So we're about out of time, but what advice would you give to dancers who are struggling with hypermobility disorders or think they have EDS or are fighting through it right now? What would you say to them?
I would say to do your best to learn your body, because it's going to be, doctors can say, especially if they don't have a lot of knowledge about EDS, which is unfortunately a lot of the time the case, they can sort of, provide some things that might not work for you. What I had to learn was what works for other people might not work for you. I got a lot of corrections over the years that seemed to work great for everyone, and I was over on the side like, are we speaking different languages? Or even, trying different treatments for things that work great for other people but don't work for me. Learn your body and listen to your body, because it's throwing a tantrum, but a lot of the time it is trying to say things to you about, you need to take care of this, and you need to hydrate more, and you need to do all that, and trying to learn and speak the language of your body, because it's trying to scream at you. And and then also that is to not be embarrassed by it. because that was something that I had to learn big time, was being okay with walking in with 2 water bottles, and being okay with wearing a leg warmer even though no one else is allowed to, and being okay with not doing petit allegro and grand allegro on your stage warm-up before the show so that you can get through the show afterwards, and learning to listen and to your body and to work with it, and just learning to not be embarrassed by it, which is, it's an absolute struggle because it's so hard when you know you're a dancer, and especially if you're in the corps ballet, you want to be out there and you want to be doing it with everybody and in the midst of it, and pushing through and having a great time, but you can't if you're not taking care of yourself. So take care of yourself, and try so hard not to be embarrassed by it, because I mean, at the end of the day, is your body, and you gotta work with it.
Yeah, and you have to live with it. It's the only one you got.
Yep.
I love this info. Present tense yoga. Awareness is a superpower, and I think those with EDS develop an elite sense of awareness. And I will say this: I 100% agree with you. Also, at the same time, I think we develop a really good sense of awareness of being able to read. I was just talking about this with Linda Bluestein like a week or so ago, of being able to read other people. We can read that room and see it, but then sometimes with our body, we don't understand it. Like you said, it might be speaking a different language. And learning how to listen to your own body is really, really important. So listen, yes, increased interoception, yes. So learning how to listen to your body and hear what it's trying to tell you, just as much as you can hear and read the other people in the room and see what's going on, is really important. People with EDS don't have as good a proprioception usually.
No,
that's a big thing with them. So their body's like, I have no idea where I am. Just wandering around without GPS.
No idea.
Yes. Completely lost in space. And it's really hard to train that. So learning that language, and I say to a lot of my dancers, when I train people with EDS, it's like their muscles are German and their connective tissue is French. And so the connective tissue is, I don't care, I'll do what you want, go ahead, stretch, don't stretch, I don't care. And then the muscles are like, we will hold on, we will be strong, So it's like one language for the connective tissue, and then the Germans with their grim efficiency are like, no, we're going to hold it, we're going to do it. And the French are like, oh, go ahead, it doesn't matter, go on. So you may have to learn to speak more than one language for your body in order to be able to speak it. Well, I so appreciate you coming on and talking. I know it's hard to share your story sometimes, but I really appreciate it. Is there any place people could get a hold of you if they had questions for you?
Yeah, my Instagram is on here. I'm Aidan On Point, and
On Point EN.
On Point with EN. It's the French way.
It's the French way.
The connective tissue.
Because it's French. Yes. It's speaking of connective tissue.
Yeah, so you can just message me on there or leave a comment. I don't post a whole lot, but I am keeping tabs on it. So yeah, if you want to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to answer questions. Thank you so much for having me today. It was so nice to talk about it and help raise awareness, because it is so important.
Yes, it is. And you can also, if you can't find her, send questions to me and I can pass them on to her. The person we referred to so much today, Dr. Linda Bluestein, is the Hypermobility Doc, Hypermobility MD. And you can find her under that name as well. She's a great resource across the country as one of the top hypermobility experts. So you are welcome, Jordan. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And this conversation will be in my story for both of them. This one and the 7 minutes at the beginning will be in my story for 24 hours, okay? Right. Thanks, Jordan. I'm seeing Jordan's name. Thanks, Aidan. And I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yep.